This is the second video in a series talking about enlightenment, 1 week after the first video. So I got to tell you, I feel very uneasy about this, not only this topic, maybe that's not it, but covering it in such a way that it enlightens the path as a generic path for people to find enlightenment. And I think that's the most difficult task. So here's an interesting thing. Again, I was talking to my wife because, let me backtrack even further. So you know how when you learn how to ride a bicycle, and it may seem difficult, and you fall off, and you got to have training wheels, and typically if someone's never learned how to ride a bicycle and they become an adult, they're very not inclined to want to be able to even attempt riding a bicycle because all the balancing and all the things that are required, it takes time and skill. But normal people don't even give it a second thought, and because they know how to ride a bike and it's been their entire life. And so when they decide to teach someone else how to ride a bicycle that has never ridden a bicycle, a lot of times they are somewhat not having empathy for the person that they're trying to teach, because it's second nature to them. It's so easy, and yet it isn't so easy for the person that's never ridden before. And as an adult, of course, an adult is heavier and they don't want to fall over and break their arm or their neck or skin their knees up, and whereas a child, it's they're kind of made out of rubber. So that's the same way with trying to reveal how to become enlightened or the path or whatever. For me, I have found it to be somewhat the same way, just thinking, well, it must be simple. And so I asked my wife, because she was the one I worked with for some time. And I said, if you recall in my last video, I said it took her like 3-4 months or so. And I said, so in that 3 or 4 month period, how difficult was it for you? Because I was trying to teach you. And she said, first off, you cannot teach anyone because there's no way to define or describe it really. But moreover, it wasn't 3 or 4 months. She reminded me that it was over 2 years of the absolute, now I'm telling you from her words, it was more than 2 years of absolute terror, absolute demolishing everything that she had known to be true, everything that she had thought was true, including her marriage to me. And we met in high school. She was 16 years old and I was 18, 1 year ahead of her in high school. And so we've been friends since we were children, essentially. And during this period of time, she was fully convinced at the time when I say the time, toward the end, that she had lost me too. And she recalled and she said to me, do you remember when I told you, this was like almost 2 years into this process. She said, you're my husband, I love you. And I don't know where you are. Are you ever coming back to Earth? Are you ever coming back for me? And she said, my comments were, no, why would I ever come back? The point is, I'm trying to help her to come to where I'm at. I can't go back to where she's at. That was the coup de grace for her. It was like, that was the end of the road. It was like everything was lost now. It was so devastating for her. I mean, she had tears in her eyes constantly. And she was not retired yet. I retired early as a firefighter, but she was still working a full-time job, and it was very devastating for her. And so when she lost everything, she said, it's like there's nothing left. It's like there's no God. There's absolutely nothing. There's no foundation. There's nothing to stand upon. Everything you thought to be true is gone. Everything you thought was real is gone. Everything that you thought loved you is gone. Everything there is gone. It is devastating beyond all imagination. And I'm not saying that to use hyperbole. I am saying it is beyond all imagination. It doesn't matter how devastating you can think of something, it's worse than that. You have nothing left to hold on to. The human body and brain and mind wants to survive, just like everything that's alive wants to survive. Well, the human mind, the brain, the thinking wants to survive. It does not want to transcend this reality and enter spiritual enlightenment. It doesn't want to do that because it gives up everything. This is on a different level than what we normally think about, though, because this is a spiritual thing. And so it's on an entirely different level. So that's the process she went through. And so she said, even after going through that, she said, of course, during the time, it would be like, no, I don't want this. I would never go through this. I could not recommend this to anyone. And then once it's done, so to say, is it worth it? Well, yeah. An infinite times, is it worth it? Yes. But that's hard to comprehend during the process. And she said, there's nothing you can teach about it, that's it. I mean, yeah, you can say that reality is an illusion, but saying it and knowing it to be true because you are it and you've experienced, you are experiencing reality as an illusion. It's such a monumental quantum leap from where we are to where that is, that even your imagination cannot imagine what it is like. And there's no way to get from here to here, and yet it happens. So there's no way to teach. But she did say one thing that was interesting, and she did say that the thing that kept her through is the same thing that Jesus taught, and that is to love yourself, love God, love everyone. And I got to admit that was the same for me well over a decade ago when I went through this process. Love is the absolute only way you're going to experience the I guess the enlightenment that I call the second enlightenment, which is the enlightenment of God. The first, or the enlightenment that physicality is an illusion, that's the enlightenment of Buddha. And that particular one, you can be enlightened in that. And that's a huge thing, by the way. But that doesn't expose or bridge the gap to where you experience God. That just exposes and bridges the gap of this reality. And I don't mean to say just, because it's a huge thing. Obviously, enlightenment of Buddha is a huge thing. And Satan is enlightened at the same level as Buddha is. But Satan is not enlightened in the same way Jesus was enlightened, in that the enlightenment of God. That Satan is not enlightened to, and never will be under his current quest to be what he is. Shiva, if you're in Hinduism, same thing. Same individual, by the way. So that would be a description of the pathway, so to say, to enlightenment. It's very difficult. And there's no way to define how to really get there. However, yes, it is exactly as I've defined it, in that reality is an illusion. But most people that try to define that, which are not enlightened but maybe say they are, is they go, reality is an illusion. And then they go on to define things like, well, if you're in the universe, matter cannot be extinguished. It just goes from one existence into another existence and everything. But that is someone that doesn't understand it from an experiential point of view, because that particular, not that particular, enlightenment extinguishes everything. There really is no reality. There's no light. There's no physical. There never was. Not only there never was, nor could there be. Enlightenment eliminates everything out of existence in a physical format. It exists, yes, but only as like a dream would be. It could change at any moment. Everything could change at any moment. When a person becomes enlightened, what really, 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 really starts to come together for them is they start thinking about, okay, since everything is an illusion, it is imaginary, then how is it I'm imagining this? How is it that I'm experiencing this physical reality? What is actually taking place here? And you're not in a situation where you would think, well, maybe there's a possibility that reality exists. No, that would never enter your mind if you're enlightened, because you know it can't exist. And yet, everything appears to exist. And so you're thinking, what is the point and purpose of this illusory realm? And there are things that are extremely real. And those things that are extremely real are things like love. Love is real. Greed is real. Hatred is real. Now, in saying hatred is real, some people could say, well, hatred is the result of ignorance. But that's not true because ignorance isn't real. Ignorance means that you're lacking knowledge or awareness, but that isn't the problem. The lacking of awareness or knowledge is the result of hatred. It's the result of greed. That's why Satan is the way Satan is. It's not that he lacks awareness of these things. The reason he is the way he is because he has a heart of greed and hatred and these sorts of things. And as a result of those things, then ignorance comes to play. So yeah, ignorance isn't a real thing, but it's the result of other things that are real. And love creates a pathway, well, to God essentially, but also to the awareness and the understanding of everything eventually, which would define God. So I guess another thing I was thinking about is I did this last week, recall, and I've had a few comments because I did a lot of writing during that really crazy period of my life that lasted several years. I did a lot of writing back then, and I went over it again this last week to some degree, recalling the time when I was doing all these writings. And it was bringing back my memories of what I was doing during that period of my life. And I do have to say it was a incredibly bizarre period. I said, I'm retired. And a lot of times I would just, of course I would give my wife notice, but I would pack my bags up and leave for 2 weeks. And I would travel up north, or I would sometimes find myself sequestered in the middle of a forest. There was many times when I was just wandering around. And it's a bizarre thing because I recall several times there must be some sort of a spiritual aura or something that takes place. And because there's no other explanation for what took place several times in my life. And that was like a couple times I would be in a park, sitting just like this, reading a book or meditating in a park with, maybe people. I'm not trying to draw attention. I'm in an area where hopefully nobody will come by, but there's paths here or there or whatever. And a couple times it's like, I'm not kidding you. I had children, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, 8, 9 years old or whatever, 5 or 6 of them that would just for some reason gravitate to me and be playing on the ground right below my bench and brushing up against me. And I remembered at the time thinking, this is odd, because children are not only taught, but would never gravitate towards a stranger, a person that they don't know and never have met. And that happened many times for me. And we know that, well, I say we know, I know, that children haven't been adultized. I just made that word up. And so they actually do have this intuition type thing, this spiritual connection to God, if you will. And I'm not saying I'm God, but they felt that because there's no other explanation why that would happen. During that several year period when I was really going through this, I was, I don't even know how to define it. It was just a really bizarre time of my life. Now, I'm going to absolutely destroy the saying, but at least you'll know what I mean if you've read Eastern philosophy. The enlightened saying of somebody that said, when before I was enlightened, mountains were mountains and hills were hills and valleys and streams, and then I became enlightened and they were no longer mountains and streams. And then later, mountains and streams were mountains and streams, and I carried a bucket of water, and just like everything before. As I said, I'm going to destroy the saying, and I did. But you understand, if you've read that kind of stuff, what I'm talking about. And that's an incredibly good definition of a path from, into, through enlightenment and enlightenment. Yes, everything has changed from point A to point B. It's completely changed, but you recognize over here, you recognize that this reality is something that, well, you can't escape until death. You can't escape it. You may experience a spiritual realm or reality simultaneously, but you're not going to escape here. But during that transitional period, and I won't say it's well, maybe it's transitional, but during that transitional period, like when I was in the parks and all that kind of stuff, yeah, that period is the one that I'm talking about, that if you're married or you have a significant other or whatever the case may be, that is going to destroy your relationship, because nobody, when I say nobody, my wife and I were able to get through it, but we have a very special bond of love and friendship since we were kids, and it was incredibly difficult. And so what I'm saying is, during that period, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how you can maintain that connection, because the person is almost like a stranger when they're going through that process. Now, so far, what I've said in this video doesn't seem to have any ability to teach you how or where or what to do to become enlightened, but it does define the difficulty that people have to go through. Another interesting thing you know, there's a philosophical, maybe it's more psychological or whatever, the thing about, let's say you can pick any subject, like a red car, for instance, and you can say, well, I haven't seen red car in a long time. But if you talk about a red car now, the next time you go out to the grocery store or whatever, you see red cars everywhere. And so that's the concept. And so thinking about making this video over the last week, so many things took place in my life that I was basically had something to do with it. And so one of those things was the concept of being tested. And so I was listening to someone talk, and they were defining how the concept of, you never know what a person is like until you scratch the surface. For instance, a person may be your friend and you may know them, and you think you know this individual, and then for some reason they become extremely wealthy, and almost instantly, in many cases, that friend is no longer your friend. And not because it's a different social circle that they run in, but that person might, you scratch the surface and now you see that they're hateful, evil, they don't even want to be your friend anymore, or just, that is an incredibly common occurrence. but it never seems to show up unless money is involved. Same thing is true with power. It shows up once the power. So testing or scratching the surface or scratching the surface means to me that, you know, you got something and you don't know what it is. It's covered with dust or whatever, and you scratch the surface and you can see, oh, it's a piece of glass under there, or oh, it's a car body, or this or that or whatever. So when the Enlightenment process, I mean, it's like, what is the point of going through this difficult trial where it is so phenomenally devastating to go through it? And it's like, so why? What's the point of that? Well, the point of it is 99.999 to the 9th degree or whatever. People go through this process and they go, no. I'm switching paths. I'm going a different way. Because it becomes too difficult. And maybe, and I do say maybe because I'm not 100% sure about this, but maybe that's just the way God created things, in that if you're not going to, so to say, give up everything, if you're not going to be so dedicated that you're willing to give up everything, your life, your spiritual understanding, everything, if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to be blessed with enlightenment. Maybe that's what it's about. It's just like the money or the power or this or that. It's like the test is given. What does the person do? What does it make them? And the person that becomes enlightened, all of this stuff happens, and what is the person like? What is the outcome? Well, if the person is going to become enlightened, they're always going to become enlightened. And when the surface is scratched so deep that you're getting right into the heart, and then the heart is scratched, and you spiritually, everything is going to have to be seemingly destroyed. And if you deviate off that path and go, I'm done with this, you're not going to become enlightened. Now think about the story of Buddha. For 10 years or more, he was on that path and he wouldn't give up. I mean, the story goes that he went to so many different gurus and so many different methodologies, and initially when you read, you would understand it to mean that well, it wasn't a valid guru, or it wasn't a valid path. But in reality, it was all valid. Every step of his path over a decade was valid, because he wouldn't have gone from point A to point B under the tree and become enlightened had he not taken all those paths. And then the last step, sitting under the tree, it's like, I'm going to sit here until I die. That was the last straw for him. And it certainly seems apparent that that is the process. As difficult as it may sound, that is the process. Who wants to do that? Seriously, if you think about it, who wants to give up or go through that process that is so devastating that your own life becomes of no value? It's like your own life, it's like, hell, I would give it up 100 times over. I mean, who would do that sort of thing and think it is of value? Me personally, I think I said it in some other video, I did not think it was of value, it would be worth it. I wrote in my own personal journal well over a decade ago. In the midst of this trial, I wrote, basically my words are something of this nature. I wrote in there, if I come face to face with the creator of all reality, God, and this creator God says, well, you've really done a good job here. You went through the trials and the tests. I'm going to give you everything. You're going to be just like Jesus. You can have anything, everything. You are blah, 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 blah. I wrote in my journal, my comment back to the creator God would be, it wasn't worth it. I don't care if you make me your right-hand man. I don't care if you say, I will replace you. I can be God of everything. It doesn't matter. It isn't worth the trials that I'm having to go through. That's what I wrote. It was horrible, devastating, unbelievable. You can't imagine. I remember telling a friend of mine at the time, well, and this is in confidence because I didn't want this to get out, really, but this was after a while. I told a friend of mine, I said, if all my children were to die a horrible death and my wife to be horribly killed, and I were to lose everything, that would pale in comparison to this trial that I've had to go through for over 8 years. That is what I told a friend at the time. Now, in retrospect, would I think that the trials I had to go through, are they worth it? Well, the interesting thing is, afterwards, I said, oh my gosh, you cannot put a number on it. I would go through that trial 10 trillion times to get what I have right now today. There isn't a number that can be, I would burn in hell for 1 billion kalpas of time to get what I currently have. You cannot define what enlightenment is, other than to say there's no way to I think I'm going to cut this short. There's God, this is hard. There's no way to quantify that's hard. There's no way to quantify the love and joy of enlightenment. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're absolutely lying. It doesn't matter how hard it gets. It's worth it. And when I say I love all those that get through it, you will understand what I'm saying. It is not a bullshit love that people teach and talk about. It isn't even comparable to the bullshit love that people talk about. It's real. And damn, it's hard the process is hard. I don't know why it's hard. I don't know why it's so hard. But it is. I mean, it was difficult for Buddha. I mean, for a Christian to think about Jesus and having to hang on a cross, I mean, this was not an easy thing. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'm going to cut this one short, and I'll be putting on my thinking cap to see if what else I can come up that makes it a little more, helps to define what enlightenment is, and the pathway that might help you get there, get through it. Again, thank you for watching.